And again, thanks folks for joining us. Beth Bramlett sent her regards. She got a better offer today and is at a museum in Atlanta. And she was telling me about an exciting acquisition. She came across a museum that was de-acquisitioning something, and it looks like she's going to get it. So if it all goes well, she'll have some fun information for us soon. And we have a new face for us, Jean Hurd. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Excuse me. Just want to say hi to the group and talk about your interest in Expo. Caught you right as you were eating. Perfect timing. Great. Okay. Well, basically, we have a multi-part program today. We're going to start with Richard Herring is going to talk about, again, if you built the theme park and filled it with monkeys, what could possibly go wrong? And then we have a variety of photos from various odds and ends. To keep Glenn Barker happy, we have some new Knott's Berry Farm ones. And then the majority of them will go into Expo 67. And I don't think I did Disney World last week. I think I did Disneyland, but not Disney World.
That's correct.
So, yeah, we have a whole bunch. So with that, Richard, I'll turn it over to you and look forward to hearing about the monkeys.
All right, thank you very much. Let me see if I can share the screen and can make it work right. And we got to share the sound too. Okay. Oh, I got a configuration thing going. What can you guys see anything that's?
Yeah,
You got your title slide.
You see the title slide.
Yeah, and the whole focus, Adobe Focus Reader.
Okay, all right. And the title slide says Mayhem in Massapequa?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, good. That's just as it should be. So let's go ahead. You know, I've been thinking about some of the things that we've been doing, and every once in a while, those of you who are in the Disney world talk about when things go wrong. And I've been thinking more generally about what we do in these
Richard, you there?
He froze. He's having an extraordinary moment in his ordinary world.
Are there a large number of monkeys suddenly there?
Richard, if you can hear us, you have your hand to your head and you're frozen solid.
I'm gonna text to see if he sees it.
Sorry. Let me see if I can text him here. Suggesting that he
Okay, he's coming back. Bring him back in.
Richard's house is surrounded by baboons right now.
Yes, that's it. That's what's going on. Whoops. There.
Turn on your volume.
You're muted there, Richard.
It was going fine, and then all of a sudden it started to reconfigure and reinstall itself. So thank you to the patience. Let's do the sharing again.
No, Don was convinced your house was invaded by a horde of monkeys.
Not quite yet. That's Congress. That's not. All right. Have you folks? Are we there?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. All right. So people visit extraordinary places to escape the ordinary world. That's not really a big thing. But Disney has made that quite an art form. It creates an immersive environment that's different from what you experience. And people have been going to zoos and circuses and all kinds of other things like that to get out of the ordinary world and go into an extraordinary one. But what happens when something goes wrong in that extraordinary world? And I thought about this because a couple of you have talked about working in the Magic Kingdom or Epcot or something where things go badly wrong and you have to do things to restore it. And what happens is the ordinary world then seeps in again to restore order and try to bring the extraordinary world back. This is kind of something that the author Randy Olson was talking about in terms of narrative structure, that you've got something that's stable, you go to something that's out of the ordinary, but it can be easily deflated, especially if you're putting so much effort into sustain an illusion. So let's consider the case of Frank Buck. I've heard the name before, but only recently found out more about him. Frank Buck was a gentleman from Texas, and he got really interested in traveling the world when he was a kid. He turned out to be a big game hunter. He would trap animals and he'd bring them back into the United States, sell them to zoos, do other things like that. And he became very, very popular for it. The thing that really put him on the map for everybody was in 1930, he went on an expedition in which he brought a cameraman, and they made very, very naturalistic filming of animals in conflict, where they would, a cougar would try to hit on a tiger, a python would wrap itself around an alligator and break its back. They set up blinds so the animals couldn't see or smell them, and took the film of all these animal encounters, and they didn't know what the heck they were going to do with it. And they didn't even see it until it got back and processed into New York. And when they did process it and take a look at it, they said, you know, this is really good. We can make a full-length picture of it. And so he really did a service by doing a naturalistic film about, you know, conflict and some of the ugly stuff that goes on in the natural world. So he was a star of a movie in 1930. His popularity grew. Look, let's bring this back. His popularity grew, and there were even Topps trading cards for Frank Buck. And there was a Frank Buck Explorer card, Explorer club that kids could join. And he really became popular. By the way, I know somebody who was in Vietnam and had a king cobra do this to him. They really do that. So, well, anyway, his fame grew. He became part of the amusements at the Century of Progress exposition in Chicago. And I include this picture of it because I thought it was nice. It's an artist's rendering, but it shows you how that 1933 exhibit spanned both the water and the land. And I thought this was a nice view of it. It had a northern island, they call it, and a southern island. And I tried to find out where Buck's Jungle Land was, but I hadn't found any reference to it. So I couldn't find out where on the map his Jungle Land is.
It'd be roughly at the 3 o'clock section of the map.
Okay, roughly around there.
Sorry, 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Okay.
All the way at 9 o'clock, the observatory's out there. It would be in the amusement area, which was just to the right of the observatory.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I searched in vain. I couldn't get a definitive reference. One of the things there, and a main feature, was a Jungle Land monkey mountain, where they had a couple hundred monkeys there. The exhibition, from another picture I saw, looked like it might have been about, not a city block wide, but at least a half or a third block wide. It was fairly big, but what I can tell, the Monkey Mountain was the center of this compound, and really, really interested and got everybody's attention. Now, after that fair was over, he decided to move to a compound on Long Island where he could keep the animals, prepare them for shipment, and dole them out to the Prospect Park Zoo, the garden, excuse me, the Central Park Zoo, other people that wanted, he became a purveyor of wild animals. Those of you who don't know Long Island very well, I wanted to show you this map for a couple of reasons. Long Island is 120 miles long. It's a big thing. A number of us on the call are from there, but you don't really think about it because of the congestion and the density of population there is. But the thing I wanted to point out is, first of all, Manhattan, or the Big Apple, is not that big compared to either Greater New York or Long Island. You see Manhattan's just that little kind of sliver up there. Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island are bigger. Nassau County is bigger still. And Suffolk County is physically absolutely huge. Now, for some reason, he decided to put his compound right on the dividing line between Nassau County and Suffolk County. And half the time when you take a look at the references to what he did, it says, well, this took place in Amityville, and the other half time it says this took place in Massapequa. Well, I can attest to you that within a quarter of a mile of where his thing was is a thing called County Line Road, and it's called County Line Road for a reason, because it's the divisor. But anyway, he chose to put his compound very near the South Shore, not too far from where the top of that little arrow is that you see along that dividing line. This is a picture of the entrance. There was a zoo that people could go to. There was allegedly a hotel, and there were shops, and that was the entrance. I'm not sure what road this is on. I first of all would guess Sunrise Highway, which is the main drag, where they identified the site of Frank Buck Zoo, but I can't attest to that.
Yeah, Richard,
Yes.
some background noise coming on. I don't know what that was, and that was Sunrise Highway.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, this thing also had a monkey mountain, and it was scaled down from what we saw at Chicago, but it still had 570 monkeys in it. It was, multi-stories tall. There was an 8-foot concrete wall around it. It was a 6-foot moat. Basically, the monkeys usually stayed put on this monkey island, and people were really very interested in it. And it was a main attraction. But then what happened? Monkeys being what they are, they escaped. 150 of them about escaped. A workman went to do some maintenance on the Monkey Mountain, put a gangplank over the moat to get there, and said, oh, I better take the gangplank back. And we went back to the gangplank, and this is about 11 in the morning. By that time, 150 of these animals had escaped off the gangplank into the rest of the zoo. Now, that's about 1 a second. That's pretty fast when you think about it. There was no training involved for doing this. The monkeys just got the heck off the gangplank and plowed through and escaped into the zoo. Now, they did not appear to hang out at the zoo. They started to explore, and only 30 of them returned back. I was a little surprised at that, because they know that they had food and shelter and everything like that, but only 30 had returned by the end of that first night. And it made the news. And I didn't double check, but since I see the masthead on this, that could have been, it could have been a first page item on the New York Times the next day. But anyway, it was of note, and part of it is because of the things that the monkeys got involved in. I want to show you a little bit of what the area is like, so you get a sense of what they did. We talked about Sunrise Highway. If you take a look at that lower left diagonal, it's, I think, 2 or 3 lanes either way. You see, that's pretty big. That's Sunrise Highway, which is the main thoroughfare. And I think it goes the whole extent of Long Island. I lived just 3 blocks away from Sunrise Highway in Freeport myself. If you take a look at those little orange dots, around one of them somewhere is where the entrance was to the Frank Buck Zoo, but I can't tell which one was which. And apparently the best reference I saw said there was about 40 acres of the zoo area. There's one other thing I want to point out to you is if you take a look at that lower diagonal of Sunrise Highway, you'll see what looks like a grove or a bunch of trees. Those trees are on an embankment that border the Long Island Railroad that has multiple spurs and directions through Long Island. The Babylon branch, which I've been on numbers of times, goes through there. That figures into the story a little bit too. About 50 monkeys stopped a train the first afternoon after they went back. That Long Island Railroad thing, as you see, is very, very close to where the zoo itself was. Allegedly, and I couldn't really verify it, they said 30 of these things were walking around on Seaford Road or Seaford, which is a town about 3 or 4 miles away, and the driver plowed into a tree, either to avoid them or because he was so shaken up seeing these things running around in the road. 20 of them came by, but they perched in high trees and also very wide flagpoles that were there, and they wouldn't come down. So that was another thing that they had to deal with. 2 were electrocuted by the third rail, because it's an electrified rail mostly down there. And 2 were electrocuted in Hicksville, which is several towns away, by climbing high tension wires and trying to get that last rung, which was the last rung that they could grab before they got zapped. So that's the kind of trouble that they got into. Pardon me. Okay. Now, what I said was when something goes awry, something has to come by to countervail it, to restore order. And that's an ordinary world thing. And sure enough, the authorities and the people that are designated, you know, like Bill with the LAPD to take care of mayhem, rushed into the breach to get these things done. But what was interesting is attendance to the zoo increased after this happened, and 4 policemen had to be out there to direct traffic because so many people wanted to see what was going on. The zoo offered free passes to anyone who returned a monkey. I don't know how many got returned. There were no things about it. There were anecdotal stories about it, but it wasn't a whole lot. I think maybe about a dozen of these monkeys got returned by people. One story was one guy drove around with a basket of apples in his pickup truck, and they knew to find these things, and that's how he got them and brought them back into the zoo. And you'd get a free pass for the season if you had done that. The Massapequa Fire Department came with a 65-foot hook and ladder in order to prod the monkeys down from their perches on the flagpole and on these trees. And things finally came back where they accounted for all but I think 10 or 12 of the monkeys that had done. The zoo itself existed till about 1944. Frank Buck died in 1950. There was a war effort going on in that 40-acre area, but it became a zoo again. It became Massapequa Zoo, and I must have driven past it when I was a kid in the backseat of my car while my parents were telling me to look the other way, so I wouldn't be distracted by the zoo probably. But and there was a drive-in movie and a revived zoo that was there until about 1968, and Bill told us that he was there last time we got together. And this didn't stop Frank Buck from being successful. He had an attraction, which was another jungle land in the 1939 World's Fair. First heard about this years ago. There was an excellent book by the computer scientist David Galertner about the fair, about the 39 fair, and it was a lot of fun to read. And he mentioned Frank Buck's Jungle Land in that book. So it had even bigger Monkey Mountain. He stayed with the thing that worked. That was in the 1939 fair. And I did find a couple of things about monkeys escaping and causing a little bit of mayhem there too, but it was nothing on the scale of what we were just talking about. So we can say, well, this is interesting. It's the 30s. It was a simpler time. It couldn't happen again, of course, but it has happened again. Already this year, and at least twice in 2 different countries. Here's Route 80, Danville, PA, about 15, 20 miles away from where I went to college. The Center for Disease Control bought 100 monkeys from Mauritius Islands or something like that, brought them back, and as the truck was driving along at 80, it was hit by another truck on Route 80, and the boxes were scattered all over the roadway. 4 monkeys escaped. And I don't know what to think about this, but in terms of what risk the monkeys pose to the rest of us, but they dispatched helicopters, sharpshooters, night vision goggles. The first night they had shot and killed 3 of the monkeys. The next day they trapped the 4th that was at large, and order was restored there. And even in non-tranquil times, here's war-torn Ukraine. And in September, a chimpanzee escaped from a zoo in Kharkiv. And if you look very carefully, you'll see a black gorilla. Well, it's not a gorilla. It's a large chimpanzee on the bicycle being coaxed back to the zoo by its keepers. Apparently, it was running around the town until it started to rain, and the keepers came out and offered it food and put a coat on it and coaxed him onto the onto the bike and brought it back. So, and the 1935 thing has not gone for naught. There's a book about it. I found this on Amazon last night. The Massapequa Historical Society had a speaker that wrote a book about the 1935, a fictionalized account of the 1935 event, and you can get it on Amazon. So the moral of the story is that people seek novelty of extraordinary worlds as an escape from their ordinary world, but those extraordinary worlds can be deflated very quickly, especially if monkeys are involved, or if there's a lot of artifice and a lot of effort to maintain the illusion. But the ordinary world's got to rush in to restore the extraordinary world and its illusions, so things can continue. Most all the sources that I restricted this to are public sources. Randy Olson, the author, provided some information about narrative structure, and these are all some of the sources you can go to at the comfort of your own browser to look this stuff up. In special collection at Hofstra, which is the university in Uniondale. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Richard. It's really interesting. You know, 2 little extra bits of information for you. At the Chicago World's Fair, when he, I'm trying to remember, there was a news report, it was either Chicago or New York. A person said, you've never heard any noise in your life as you heard when it came feeding time at Monkey Mountain. Yeah, they said the monkeys were very tuned to what time of day it was, and that when the feeder came out, he said it was a roar that you could hear anywhere around the place. When they closed down the Chicago Fair, Frank Buck didn't want all the monkeys back, so he was sold for $1 a piece. And there were reports of kids that were going and taking their allowance money and buying a monkey and bringing it home, and then their parents being sort of pissed off and making Buck take them back. So, but you can imagine, 100 monkeys in Chicago basements. And he also had a Monkey Mountain during the same time that he had the Frank Buck exhibit at the 39 New York World's Fair. He had the same thing at the San Francisco World's Fair. He had another exhibit there.
Yeah,
So a lot of monkeys.
yeah. Well, there are interesting things. We had a monkey colony at my undergraduate institution because the head of the department was an animal behaviorist, and they're intriguing. They're intriguing.
Great. Well, thanks. Appreciate it. Anybody have any comments or questions for Richard?
What kid wouldn't want a monkey for $1? That certainly would buy
For
one.
$1.
Even now I would buy one. San Francisco, most zoos probably have a monkey island, I'm assuming, of some sort. I was a kid, San Francisco, I think in the late 50s, early 60s, they had taken the monkeys out of what was called the monkey house. And they put them on a monkey island, which it had a mountain, and it was an island with water, and they could actually go inside the mountain for protection. But it was really a big hit at the zoo. You could watch it for hours.
Well, it's
Monkeys could actually be quite dangerous. You can underestimate their strength. They're much stronger than a human.
I was
Oh,
just
yeah.
thinking
Oh, yeah.
exactly that. When the picture of the guy with the chimpanzee and the bicycle, I was thinking about how many people have made the news because the monkeys ripped their face off. So,
Yeah, I was just going to say
Right,
that.
right.
Yeah.
ugh.
I,
Well, we'll get
I
away
think
from-
they also bite.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, they do.
Wasn't there
my-
a short-lived Frank Buck TV series like in the 70s or something like that?
yeah, that was. It was done at Warner Brothers, and I was actually at Warner Brothers at the time. It was interesting. It was Bruce Boxleitner, and they
Right.
brought in all sorts of monkeys and everything. So you had the Walton House sitting right there, and right across a dirt road with all these monkeys. And they brought in lions and that. And my office was probably maybe 150 feet from the main pond that they use for it. So you'd be sitting at your office, typing away, writing a memo, and all of a sudden you hear an elephant trumpet or a monkey, a lion roar or something. And you think, I hope it's okay to get to the car tonight. They were very careful though. They during the time they did the show, I don't recall any of the animals ever escaping. And they would put up big barricades warning people, don't go into the jungle, when they were filming. But yeah, it was Frank, Bruce Boxleitner, and I'm trying to remember the name of the woman that was in the show. It was pretty good.
Hmm.
It was fun to watch.
I think it wasn't called Tales of the Gold Monkey.
No, that was a whole different one. That was
Oh, okay.
that was that was the one where Stephen Collins was
Right, right.
explorer, and he flew around the Pacific doing battles with the Japanese and everything else.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one we're talking about had Frank Buck in the
Right.
title, if I
Oh,
remember.
okay. So
They
it
were
was
both-
about Frank Buck.
Pretty much simultaneous though. So I think
Yeah,
they-
I don't know if there are any other Leave It to Beaver fans here. One of my favorite episodes is Stanley the monkey. Beaver gets a monkey. I forget how he gets it, but anyway, we've all seen the show, I'm sure, at one time or another. June Cleaver is very prim and proper. So Stanley has gotten out of the cage, unbeknownst to June, and she's entertaining a bunch of women for tea, and she opens up the dining room door. Stanley is swinging from the chandelier.
Sounds like any Saturday night at my house.
remember.
An interesting thing for Richard, Miriam C. Cooper, who was the producer of an explorer and the original Indiana Jones inspiration, but the producer of King Kong, was very, very great friends with Frank Buck. And he even he even has the Robert Armstrong character, who's Carl Denham, the Carl Denham character, based on Frank Buck, and he makes an allusion to Frank Buck. There's a little bit of dialogue where he goes, Denham says to the theatrical agent, "You act like I've never brought anyone back alive." So that was a little allusion to his friend, Miriam C. Cooper's friend, Frank Buck. There you go.
It's neat. Well, we'll get away from monkeys and their shenanigans. We'll take some more look at pictures. As I mentioned last week, these are the unifying theme behind them is pictures that I've restored this year. And for the Expo 67 ones I'll get to in a minute, some of them were ones I restored last night. But we have Glenn here who asked last week specifically for more Knott's Berry Farm. So I have 4 Knott's Berry Farm pictures that I restored this week just for you, Glenn.
Hey, thanks a lot. I enjoyed them.
Hey, no problem. You know, let's see, screen sharing. Okay. So basically, these are souvenir slides, the Panaview souvenir slides that I've talked about in other meetings. And this was a solid bright red, like ruby red. The trouble is for the souvenir slides all throughout the 50s and 60s, they used Kodacolor film, not Kodachrome, and it just turns red like mad. But again, with the computer, you can do some really good stuff. So it's not 100%, but it takes us back. So in this particular one, this is campfire entertainment, and they're all going around the music around the campfire. Then we get to go out and see the blacksmith hard at work. I got a kick out of here off to the left. Horseshoe nail rings for only 25 cents. And I don't know if any of you ladies would be wearing a ring made out of a horseshoe nail, but it was quite a bargain if you wanted one. This was a diorama they had here called Wagon Train Night Scene. I don't recall the exact name of the building. Maybe you do, Glenn, but they had a whole bunch of windows that you could go and look, and it was a 3D model of the like the horse and the wagon, and in the background, the painting of the wagon train going off into the distance. And I think they were.
I remember it, Bill, and they had a soundtrack that
Yep.
played a little like a 5-minute show of them coming out from, across the deserts and stuff.
Yeah, they had about a half a dozen of these dioramas, and the thing would go dark, and then the next one would light up, and you'd move your way down, and like you said, Glenn, the soundtrack would come on and keep you going.
Yeah, I was in the, I don't know what street that was, but they had these other things they called peek-ins. And my favorite was the guy in the barber shop, and the barber's giving him a shave, and there's a wanted poster with the guy on the wall behind him, and he's kind of looking at it.
That's a good one. This one I got a kick out of, the old schoolhouse. The kid with the dunce cap is really looking like he's having a great time, isn't he? But again, these are all the sort of stuff, the Panaview souvenir slides that you could buy back then and take home and show all your friends where he had been, and not knowing that they were turning red underneath you. So we'll get into Expo 67 now. And again, some of these are ones I just did yesterday. Most of these I think are going to be of the 67 year. Some of them I do know jump into 1970, maybe a couple other years from Man and His World, when Expo 67 came back as a theme park as opposed to a World's Fair. But Czechoslovakia was an exceedingly popular pavilion at the fair, had a restaurant really well known, and I was really glad to find this shot of it. The whole thing in Czechoslovakia, they did an awful lot with glassware and other exhibits inside, but the restaurant really had rave reviews, and some of the longer lines would have found for some of the dining venues there. Overhead view looking down, that's called Engineer Plaza in the middle where the statue is, and the circular building with all the flagpoles, and we'll see more of the flags coming up, was the United Nations. Indians of Canada off to the left. Again, most of you people probably know it, but these islands were pretty much man-made. There was an island that was expanded, other totally man-made. and it was a massive undertaking to build the fair. And it really worked out well, and it worked out so well, it lasted for a good 10 years or so after, with most of the pavilions staying on for year after year. Here's again more of the same area, but this time at night. Indians of Canada off on the left, and the flags of the United Nations off on the east there. One of the things that I enjoyed there was the flowers, and the grounds were very nice. They didn't end up with any big empty plots of land like the '64 World's Fair had done, that they had to fill up with unplanned gardens or plazas of meditation or anything like that. But they had quite a few of these wide swaths of flowers and greenery throughout the area. So it didn't do like what you had at Expo, the '84 World's Fair in New Orleans, where it was concrete, asphalt, that sort of thing. There was a fair amount of color and trees and things to break it up and help cool off some of the area. Nighttime view, they had fireworks every night. This is over areas called La Ronde, the amusement area at the far end of the grounds. Down below, you can see the aquarium that was built there. This is the Cuba restaurant. Cuba was a very controversial pavilion in that the exhibits inside were all about how good the Cuban former government was, and how evil the West was, trying to do things like blockade it and have embargoes and that. So the US government did its best to convince Americans not to go to the Cuba pavilion, which of course made me and all the other Americans absolutely enthralled to go there and see what we were not supposed to go see. Habitat, modular housing. These houses were all built on a machine type setting on the grounds, and then picked up with cranes and stacked up there. And you basically would buy a 1, 2, 3 cube apartment, and depending on how much money you had, they were all stacked up here. Originally, Habitat was supposed to be about 3 times the size that it came out to be, but funding, like many other projects, caused it to go back. So it became a real eye opener. The architect that did it has done similar projects about 2, 3 other places. But you could take a tour. You could go. People were actually living in there during the time of Expo '67. So they had one apartment that was open for tours, and you would wait on the line. And some people didn't want to wait on the line. They would just go and knock on the doors of somebody else's apartment and say, hey, could I look around? I don't want to wait on the line. Or, hey, could I use your bathroom? That sort of thing. So Habitat became very popular today. It's got some very nice views of the city. If you look for real estate, it's very highly priced, and it's kind of an interesting area that still survived and done so well. So they do get. I think the architect, his name is Moshe
Safdie.
Yeah, thank you. I think he still maintains an apartment that was part of his as part of the project, and that the group gives tours of it about once a year as a fundraiser. So
Actually, more than just once a year.
Oh.
They do have them several times a month, and they just announced their schedule for November even. And they're led by architects. I've been on the tour. It was on my long-time bucket list for years. And a few years ago, before the pandemic, I did go on the tour. Absolutely fascinating. And you are taken into Safdie's unit, which was formerly the one of the Commissioner General of the fair. So that's where he had various receptions and so on, received foreign dignitaries during the fair. And it really is a terrific tour, but it even attracts architects from around the world who come to see it. One afternoon before the tour, I was just standing outside looking at it, and one person near me came over and said, oh, he was an architect from Colombia who just came to Montreal. He had to see it. And later, a few minutes later, an architect from India also came up to me and started talking and said, yep, that he wanted to see this legendary development.
well, if all goes right, we'll be back up in Montreal July of next year. And if you have a site about where to sign up for tours or anything, please let me know. I'd love to go take it.
Okay.
So,
Can I
You
quick
just
just ask a
Google-
question, Harold? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Did they mention, did Queen Elizabeth stay in Habitat when she visited Expo? I read that she
No.
did. I don't know if that's true.
I believe she stayed on the Royal Yacht Britannia.
Okay. Which
which
was
they
moored
had-
right next to it.
yeah,
They had docked at La Ronde where there was a marina there.
Oh, okay.
yeah, we're gonna see more of the marina coming up, but no, I think Harold's right. I think she stayed on the ship. I think for security, that's about all they would, be comfortable with.
Mhm.
So if you go out to the grounds today, this wooden tower is lying there on its side. That's the Korea Pavilion. It was all manufactured in Korea, like a Rector set. Put it together, take it apart, take it over to Montreal, put it together, and raise it up there. The mini rail track is going right there. It's in this particular one, you can see it's either beginning of the year or end of the year because the trees are either getting or losing their leaves, and they're also look how warmly everybody is dressed.
The tower kind of looks like Lincoln Logs.
It does. It's really interesting seeing it sitting there. You hope that they'll re-erect it and put it back. But yeah, it's pretty much a traditional style of Korean architecture, how the things fit together and give tremendous strength.
Yeah, and just on the left in the 9 o'clock position, you can see a wooden roof. That's the roof of the pavilion,
Right.
which still stands, but the walls are gone and there's just construction fencing around it, unfortunately, right by the terminal where you go to buses to La Ronde or to the casino.
Yeah. Yeah,
When
we
you get
were
off the
there.
metro, the subway.
Well, we were there about 4 years ago. That was pretty much the case. Sitting there, and and there's a couple buildings like that. One of the bank buildings, a couple others are still there that you keep hoping to, they'll come up with some use for them. But thank God they've survived that long.
Yes.
This is inside the Quebec Pavilion. Mentioned on some other talks and interior shots of some of the pavilions are kind of hard because of the lighting, the amount of light that the film needs. But I just got a kick out of this one, the various geometric shapes in there. This is again inside Quebec, and it's a model of what became the People Tree. The People Tree was part of the Canada Pavilion, and it had all these orange and yellowish panels of people from across the nation. But if you stood underneath it, they had recordings of people talking about their lives in their various villages. Mentioned in other talks that when Man in His World returned in 1968, the People Tree now just had blank panels because they had gotten all the participants to sign releases that their photos could be used without charge for Expo 67. And now they had no way to go back and get hundreds and hundreds of people to re-sign releases. So they had to replace it all with blank panels. So I remember when I think I had gone back in 1960. I wasn't there in 68, but I went back in 69 when I was up that area in college. And I did remember seeing that it was blank, and I didn't know why at the time, and later found out that it was a problem with the releases. And buses, it's interesting. You post pictures like this on Facebook, and people that live in the area will start finally remembering all these buses. They ran on this particular line for this particular date, and I enjoy it. People start talking about, yeah, that's the bus I would take to go to school or work or whatever, and it's just kind of fun to see that what's to me is a sort of random picture. People reconnect back to their truth, their childhood and stuff.
Yes, online on Facebook, there seems to be almost this cult about that model of Montreal bus called the grill buses.
Yeah.
And people just reminiscing about those and that they were the ultimate bus.
Yeah. And then other people, I'll just zoom in here real quick. People start saying, oh, wow, can you show me the ads? And they'll start talking about, oh, I shopped at that market, or I went to that movie. And, it's kind of neat that you throw yourself back 50 plus years on something like that. This is one I did yesterday. I have to go and put the names on some of these sculptures, but one of the things that was really interesting about Expo 67 was the tremendous amount of sculpture that was located across the grounds. This one was outside the Belgium Pavilion. Expo, other World's Fairs like the 39 World's Fair had huge sculptures all over the place that were commissioned pretty much by the Fair Corporation. And they were generally white, made out of plaster, that sort of thing. For Expo 67, they really went all out. They had so many pieces of artwork all across the grounds, including a large sculpture garden, rose garden, and outside many of the pavilions they had it. So a fellow named Roger LaRoche has done a really great catalog of what all the art pieces are, tracking down the ones that have survived, where they've gone. I've got to go back because I've been restoring a bunch of pictures of sculptures lately, and I've got to go back to Roger's catalog and do it. I've talked in other times, I'm not the biggest one on modern art, but some of these I can really appreciate the effort that it takes to put these together and smooth it, the metal out and everything on this. So I did this one earlier this week outside Belgium, and I just really enjoyed it. Pavilion I've mentioned before, polymer pavilion. Let's build a pavilion. Let's build out of plastic because we want to convince everybody that plastics are really good. And they had various different displays in that, of how you make polymers and what a polymer is and how you make them. In later years, the pavilion sat there empty for a number of years because nobody else knew what to do with this crazy shaped building. And then one year they said, hey, we can bring it back as the United Nations and just put the UN symbol up on top and put displays of the UN there. But it was one of those, things, built out of plastic, and it did last. Another one I did this week, Genius of Britain. This was inside the Great Britain Pavilion. We'll see another shot inside coming up. But these were all famous Britons over the years. And if you zoom in on them, you see famous poets and writers and musicians and politicians and scientists and that sort of thing. So again, I really get a kick out of seeing interior shots. Speaking of interior shots, we have the state of Maine. So the building gets a lot of ridicule for the outside, this colonial mansion sort of thing that just didn't fit in with the rest of the Expo pavilions. But inside, you could watch these guys sitting there in a duck blind, and in the background, another mannequin here. She's taking pictures of the duck hunters. So and in here, it's a little pond and little ducks floating around in it. So this one I just did yesterday. This is a hostess from the United Nations Pavilion. It's actually interesting. I looked up her name, and she's got 2 videos out on YouTube. Unfortunately, I don't speak French, so I'm not quite sure what she's saying. But if you do zoom in, if you want to look for her name, Mariana Beltran. So maybe Harold or John, you can check her and see what she's telling us. But I just again, you think working at something like Expo has just got to be a real thrill for people. And just really great to, I do want to try to track her down so I can get her a copy of her picture that she's done. We're inside the Germany pavilion. Germany had this giant large tent held up by a very few number of poles. Same technique they later ended up using for the some of the structures at the Olympics in Montreal. But these round spheres are basically displays you would look in and have exhibits going on. Off to the side was a Gutenberg printing press, various things about German technology. They had a brand new German car to convince you you'd want to get one of those. But a very large open exhibit area. From the design of it, you can see how much exhibit space they had. This one is inside Israel. Again, they had an Israel pavilion, and they also had a Judaism pavilion. But this is one of the displays inside. This one I did yesterday. This is inside the Great Britain Pavilion. That is a giant Rolls-Royce engine stuck on end. And we're looking up into that main tower of the Great Britain Pavilion that had the Union Jack up on the top of it. So again, going around this engine, you had these panels that displays could bring about again famous British like William Shakespeare, a British author, Isaac Newton, which I didn't realize Isaac Newton was British. Well, that's interesting. But again, a gigantic Rolls-Royce engine. And to this day, many of the airline fleets of the world, no matter where the planes are built, are powered by Rolls-Royce engines. Another one I did last night, a pavilion that I found really fascinating to visit. I ran these the tile work on these simulated rolls of Persian carpets were just astonishing. And unfortunately, in the later years, the Montreal weather started flexing them and cracking them off, and the tiles came off, and they had to replace them with something less interesting. But I would love to know if any of these pieces of these tile works did survive anywhere, if anybody was able to salvage it. I just think it would make a beautiful display. Just did this one yesterday. This is inside the Egypt Pavilion. They had a display of King Tut. As Roger pointed out on Facebook last night or today, most of these were replicas. You can imagine if this was the real mask of King Tut, you just couldn't put it on display, behind a set of ropes like that. So at the end of Expo 67, a lot of the stuff is sold off. So for as far as we know, somebody's sitting in a chair like this today, watching something on Zoom. So it would be kind of neat to have in your house.
Just as an aside, this happens to be the 100-year anniversary of the discovery of Tut's tomb.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I was just watching a documentary about that. My Carol takes classes, and her teacher was just going through a lot about King Tut, and I was walking past her as she was showing some of it, and yeah, that's right.
Yeah, National Geographic, their latest issue is all on that too.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's interesting. They had a big display at Expo 86 on King Tut and Ramses and all that sort of stuff. So the Egyptian interest has been a big thing at different fairs. This is one of the entrance areas. If you came in from the subway, the metro into the island, you would come up and then get to the ticket booths, buy your ticket, and then there's the blue columns of the New York State Pavilion in the background, the mini rail getting ready, the train station up there. This is back to La Ronde, the Serpentarium. They had a jungle land there. They didn't have a monkey mountain, but they had all sorts of other animals. And then they probably had a few monkeys, but not a giant collection of them. But you could go and ride a elephant around the grounds. There were camels, there were giraffes, there were all sorts of different things. In the background here, they had a giant display of snakes. Another one I did last night, this was asbestos fountain. Back in 1967, people were not aware just how carcinogenic asbestos could be if you inhaled it in your lungs. So they were very proud. They had this giant block of solid asbestos they had hewn holes in and poured water through, and you could sit around it during the day and cool off and everything. But they were touting the miracles of asbestos. They had done that back at the 39 New York World's Fair. John Manville had a giant display of asbestos and everything. I later went to work in a shipyard about 1973, and nobody was telling us about asbestos then. It was a couple of years later that people realized that it's not a great thing to have around. So now out here in Southern California, if you have what they would call cottage cheese or popcorn ceilings that were put in your house in the 60s or 70s. Oh, meantime, the dogs are going at it. Let me close the door 1 second.
Perhaps the monkeys found Bill.
No, out here, if you want to get these ceilings taken out of your house, you have to bring in a whole hazmat team that wears moon suits. They got to put big plastic bags around your house, pressurize it and everything. And then you got to take it off to a special landfill. So again, in 1967, it was pretty to look at, right?
Bill, I can imagine people sitting around that fountain enjoying a cigarette.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, one other thing to note, just to the left of the fountain, at the 9 o'clock position, looks like little flying saucers. Those were the distinctive lighting standards at Expo. That they had a light at the bottom, or bulb at the bottom of a fiberglass tube, and it shot the light up onto this reflector to reflect it onto the roadway or the pathway.
Yeah, they were really wonderful. I was looking at a picture yesterday, had a row of about 12 of them along a waterway, and it was just gorgeous.
I
One of
wish
my,
someone would reproduce them.
yeah, I keep saying wouldn't it make a great desk lamp? And I've thought about if I had
Mhm.
any mechanical skills, I keep thinking maybe in my spare time I'll try to find somebody to build me one. But I've got pictures of the Man in His World days where the former heliport is just covered with piles of these things that they had taken out that they weren't using anymore. And they were scrapping them. I mean, it's a great design. I really love them. And as you can see in this picture, they came in all sorts of different heights, and they were, to me, I love the 64 luminaires, but I think that this is even more space age.
Very futuristic.
Yeah, just a great design.
Yeah, and there are still a few of the tubes on the Sitio de Havre, which is the peninsula that I've run across, and partly broken off. None of those reflectors there, but some of those fiberglass tubes still.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that the fiberglass is really kind of deteriorated, and
Mhm.
it's very flaky and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Then they would have national days. This is a Swiss day at Expo 67. So they brought in their alpenstocks and dressed in, traditional costumes to, perform. The garden, this was interesting. It says the Garden of the Little Prince. Well, it's a playground for kids to come out and sit out there. We have not been able to figure out what the little A-frame buildings were about. So if Harold or John, if you happen to recall what they were all about, I looked in my guidebook. I didn't see anything that particularly told me what they were, but kind of a interesting shot. One I posted a couple months ago on Facebook, and again, you have the random shot that you don't know how people are going to react to. You put out something you think, oh, this is the coolest picture ever, and 3 people go, I like it. Then you put out a picture like this, and people are like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing. And this was one I enjoyed because it's just people having fun. But there were people asking me, for example, could you zoom in on the prices on the snack bar? And I said, yeah, we could do that. So you
Sure
can see,
enough.
you can have your hot
Mhm.
dog for 50 cents or a snow cone, or that sort of thing. There's always somebody that comes by though and will say something like, well, this picture was not real because and I forget what the one excuse somebody used on this particular one was that they didn't sell Sprite or some nonsense. Well, they did. I've got better things to do with my time than faking pictures of Sprite on sale at Expo 60. But yeah, there's somebody with one of the cigarettes. He's probably on his way over to the rest of the asbestos fountain. Again, we see the little thing, the sign here telling you to go out to that garden we had just seen. These signboards were really state of the art. They were all run by a punch tape at the computer center, which was operated by General Electric. But the boards were big enough that people talked in the years when in between seasons that they would actually go and climb up inside the boards and wander around. But they would give you the message in English, and then they would rotate with the French. And I've got all sorts of pictures. One of my favorite ones is a fellow of so and such from Santa Monica. Please call this number right away. And I've thought about trying to find if the guy's still in Santa Monica and ask if he ever got his message. But again, these were they didn't scroll messages; they just displayed messages. But today's world of giant, super screens and everything, this may be antiquated, but this was pretty good for 1967. It was real cutting edge. And that's the Swan Lake down below, and you can see where it got its name. One I did last night, the flags at the United Nations. Again, just there were I was lucky the days I was at Expo. I don't think I ever had rain. I think one day was a little gray, but most of the days I was there were just beautiful, crystal clear, really nice days. And they did have some significant rain some parts of the season, but I just always happen to really luck out on a good day. More of the flowers, the tower and the Korean pavilion and its tower behind. The U.S. pavilion, of course, giant geodesic dome by Buckminster Fuller. After the 67 season ended, the United States wanted to get rid of this albatross because it's very expensive to maintain it. So they gave it to the city, but then once Expo 67 came back as Man of the World, what were we gonna go? Well, we're gonna have to go get another pavilion. So they used other buildings until 1970, where they got the building back for 1 year, and then they had a fire. The skin burned off, but you can go there today. It's called Biodome.
Biosphere,
Biosphere, thank you.
right?
Appreciate it. I knew when I was saying that it was not quite right. And it's great. We went up to the top tower with Roger, and you can get a nice view looking out, and it's a lot quieter than it was, but it's a lot windier than it was because that was, in 1967, it had the plastic skin. You got up there at that top deck today, it can be a little brisk.
Yeah, that skin burned off in less than half an hour back in 76.
What's that?
The skin burned off back in 1976, about 2
Yeah.
months before the Olympics.
Right.
And in about less than half an hour, it was one repairman was just doing some maintenance work with a blowtorch, and it just went up like that.
Yeah, it's really scary to think what if that had happened during the time the pavilion was open, because these things were built without sprinklers or, other odds and ends. And
Yeah.
that thing, yeah, the plastic just burned on it. Like, we were talking a week or two ago about setting fire to, old movies, nitrate films. So that thing just burned like crazy.
There are some amazing photos of it and very
Yeah.
short videos on YouTube as well.
It's really scary. I think when I become king of the world, I'm going to outlaw blowtorches because we lost the Ford Rotunda that was taken back from the 33 World's Fair, brought back to Dearborn. That was set on fire by a welder's torch. They were fixing the roof. I can think of a whole bunch of different buildings. Randy, do you think of something?
Yeah, Expo 92 in Seville, just a couple weeks before opening.
Yeah.
One of the huge scene pavilions, Discovery, was lost to a blowtorch.
Yeah, I think they were working on the roof on that.
Yeah.
So that's one of those.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The United States Pavilion, even though it was in a dilapidated state, there was a fire there brought on by a workman.
Yeah. So we just have to tell them no more fires. Here's more of the street lights that Harold mentioned. Here's a row of them out there, and you can see that they're at different heights. They can turn them in different directions. They can tilt the angle of the disc up at top. So some of them are at a 45-degree angle. There's one there is basically at a 90, or there's a couple at a 90-degree angle. But you can see how they gave nice, soft, even lighting along the grounds. And again, I think this would make a wonderful desk lamp. Hint, hint, if anybody's inclined. This was inside the Netherlands Pavilion, and this was one just as an example of sometimes it's really hard to get a good interior shot, because in this particular one, it was either exposed for the area which was lit, the triangle in the center, or the other side. So I basically had to scan it twice and then just paste, the one on top of the other. So, because otherwise one was all blown out or the other was too dark. So again, fun with Photoshop. This is inside the Judaism Pavilion, a illustrated manuscript here. Great that they were able to bring some of these rather priceless treasures over and put them on display. One of these, they had these areas were called Expo Service Area A, B, C, that sort of thing. So if you had a shop and you were not big enough to get your own pavilion, you could buy space and put it in these general service areas. Some had snack bars, some had gift shops, some had other things. A couple of them just had like tourism type things. But again, just the random thing that the average person happened to get pictures of. It's interesting, and you try to figure out, where you can situate some of these. Well, if I come back here and see this tower that was Olympic House, so you now can figure out exactly where some of these are, because they'll have used the same design in several spots throughout the grounds, but you can see part Montreal in the background, Olympic House off there. You can start figuring out exactly where this area was. Expo Theater, they had all sorts of displays here. So we had real traditional ones like Jack Benny would come to town, do a routine. But they also had, unlike the 64 World's Fair, they allowed to have pop singers come in. So here the Turtles, Every Mother's Son are coming to town to give a concert. This is the sort of stuff Robert Moses absolutely positively refused to let them do at the New York World's Fair, which was to me a tremendous, tremendous mistake. You had the Singer Ball sitting at the 64 World's Fair, went unused 90% of the fair. If you had brought in a thing and you had to let the Turtles play there or something else, play it, that particular thing, every single person going to see that would have had to buy a ticket to go to the World's Fair and then also to go and see the Turtles. So think about what he could have done for his attendance numbers if he just let people perform at that unused venue. I mean, I think Moses did wonderful stuff for the World's Fair, but then he just did some stuff like that to me that was just bonehead stupid. So they had live shows out here pretty much almost every night of Expo 67. They had Carol Channing would come in and do Hello Dolly. They had I think Barbara Streisand was there if I remember right. I'm trying to remember the different signs that I've seen and
The
restored.
Supremes were there.
Who's that?
The Supremes.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, Diana Ross and the Supremes were there. Ed Sullivan did his Sunday night show live from there on 2 different Sunday nights in May of '67. One evening, the headliner was Diana Ross and the Supremes, and the other one was Petula Clark.
Oh, wow. That would
And they were transmitted live, and there's Ed Sullivan introducing in the audience Mayor Jean Drapeau. So he managed to mangle the name of the mayor of Montreal as well.
Now, what they did was an interesting thing here. They built the entrance to Expo 67, so you did not need to go and buy an Expo 67 ticket to go to it. But if you did buy a ticket to go to the show, then you could go to Expo 67 after. So it was a great, way to bring extra people into the area.
And the building is still standing. It's now a movie studio.
Yeah, it's one of the few ones that are out there. That's right.
Yes.
It's been, I think it was a TV studio for a number of years, and now it's a rental facility for
Yes.
films. Yeah.
It's been subdivided into various studios for films, and the offices of the Montreal Grand Prix is there as well.
Oh, great.
Because the Grand Prix track is on Ile Notre Dame.
Super. Here's the playground area again. You could drop your kids off for the day, and they could go and play around while you were going to go see the rest of it. USSR, the big sloping roof in the back. The New York State Pavilion off to the side there. And again, USSR, tremendous lines. You can imagine both for the USA and the USSR, Cold War going on, the space race and everything, that both across the river, kind of like staring at each other. And all these people here on the line are waiting to go around and go on inside the pavilion. Off to the left, one of the telephones, modern space age telephones that they decided was a terrible design, because as you were talking here, your sound would go up and bounce down, and the person on the other side could hear you more than they could hear the telephone. So they look neat, but they didn't work out all that well.
And the bridge over the river between the American and the Soviet pavilion was named Cosmos Walk in honor of the space race.
Yep. This is at the base of the people tree. You can see this is a bunch of metal sculptures all sticking out here, but you can look around and see the beginnings of the panels and everything up here. So a lot of people didn't realize you could, as I said, walk under there and hear the soundtrack that went with it. This is 1970, a view of the Man in His World going on. Again, a lot of it all still in existence and continuing. Back to Safari Land. So, sorry, Randy.
But no, I was going to say, I think that was actually Expo 67 because.
Yeah, you're right.
Because it says Montreal 67 on the mini rail.
You're right. I'm looking at that. You're right. And I also I had a similar shot to this, and I was thinking, wait a second, it was Pakistan 70 and it was red or orange. So yeah, Well, I just throw these little glitches in there, see if anybody's actually awake.
I was.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Remember, next week, Don, we ban Randy? No. This one, I got a real kick out of a Jurassic Park vibe on this. You know, the jungle Jeep and everybody's going off into the jungle, you know, what could go wrong? And as Richard showed us, what could go wrong? So, but yeah, Safari Land was out there. We can see the elephants in the background, mountain goats and everything up here. And
Bill?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that was actually Elmhurst.
Yeah, the tower in the back, it doesn't look it. So here we have a guy making an announcement, keep your arms and hands inside the mini rail at all times. Again, this was completely automated train system for Expo 67. When they used the same technology for Hemisphere in San Antonio a year later, they said, no, we don't trust the computer. We're gonna have a guy drive it. The guy was apparently reading a comic book and drove into the train in front of him and killed somebody. So sometimes self-driving is better. Hey, a Monkey Mountain. What do we got? Keeping our theme unified. So we're at Safari Land. You could come out here and buy your feed for the animals. And in the background, this was actually, if I recall right, not a Monkey Mountain. But if we go and look at it, it's a mountain goat mountain. So we can see a number of goats up along it and climbing.
That's because all the monkeys escaped. They had to put goats in there.
Yeah, it just proves that you don't want to mess around. The monkeys are bad, but the goats took over. So, but look, here's a board. Maybe they can get out. This is again the marina that we mentioned. Was the Royal Yacht actually at this marina, or was it at the main basin over by Habitat? I don't know if this could handle.
I'm pretty sure that pictures show it parked next to Habitat.
Yeah, I think
Might have been too big to get into this.
that was my guess. And again, it's from a security point of view, putting it over there at the basin would be a lot safer, you know, to not have to deal with it. But this was a big thing that you could take your boat down the St. Lawrence Seaway and you know, sail along the St. Lawrence River and come to Montreal. They did warn people that it was very popular, and do not come and just expect to find a free slip. So you had to go and make a reservation, and you know, they would you know, have a spot ready for you. But kind of a nice, elegant way to come here. More of the safari area. The Calder piece, this was built over in France, taken apart and reassembled here on site. It has since been moved, but it is still on the grounds. And you know, to me, that was always one of the things I found very strange going to Manada's World, was how the pavilions changed every year. That the U.S. pavilion was now the so and such pavilion, which was the so and such. This one really threw me off when we were back in Montreal about 4 years ago, because I had not seen it moved, you know, in recent years. So it was fixed in my brain where it was. And when we first were walking across the bridge, it's like, no, that's not right. You know, it's just really funny how, you know, your brain, you've read that it's been moved, you know that it's been moved, but it's still just, you know, when you have 10 years of it thinking in one spot and now it's in another, it's funny how you, at least for my humble brain, it takes a while to process it.
And in the new location, it's now very visible from downtown Montreal, from the waterfront.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a good spot that they moved it to it. You know, I guess they needed to redevelop this area. Down below, they had a VIP lounge and some other stuff during the fair days, but restrooms, things like that. I must have been on a kick one week as I was restoring safari pictures. So, but I got a kick here. Again, we can come and eat here because it's reasonable prices, you know, so we're not going to overcharge you. You can come on in and get your food. You can go for a camel ride or an elephant ride. This is one from 70. Again, the former steel pavilion off to the left, the triangular one, and the Canadian pulp and paper pavilion. I loved the Canadian pulp and paper. Just back in the days of the fair, you know, this green forest of you know, fake trees. Now, as I mentioned in other talks, you move out and what do you do with something that shape? Well, you know, the Interpol was in there for a number of years and various odds and ends, but it's all shaped like trees. So what do? You come up with a really crazy wild paint scheme. And I thought they did a good job here. I look at this, I think more as like a crystal mountain as opposed to a forest, but I was always, you know, interested in going back and seeing from year to year how it would be painted. There are some pieces like that sculpture that Roger found that they had no names. It was just like sculpture number 5, or, you know, the artist. I think if I built something, I'd put a name on it, but in many cases, they just didn't have a name. This is, again, Mana's World Days. This is the main pavilion done by, being run by India at the time. In the background, the former New York State Pavilion was the Yugoslavia Pavilion. Again, little shots that you don't expect just come out in a roll. The Paris Boutique. This was a complex of shops, and the post office was nearby. Got some nice views of the phone booths down below. Then people, okay, this is really good, but now I want to see inside it. And you go, well, nobody's ever satisfied. So if I find the interior of the Paris Boutique, I'll share it. This is kind of interesting one. This is a plaque that was put on at the Place of Nations for the people that lost their lives in building the exposition. Unfortunately, some bastard came by and has stolen the plaque, because if you make anything out of bronze these days, somebody's going to come by and steal it and melt it and you know, take it down. I would hope that they would go and recast this in plastic to look like this, the thing, but it's interesting how many people did have a loss of life, you know, with construction accidents as they were putting it together, including some of them very close to you know, the opening of it itself. So we tip of the hat to the people that gave so much to build it. Mention lines and how popular it got. This is the line for the United States Pavilion. There's a big rose garden off to the left. But those flags out there, all the flags of the United States, and then these people are all lined up all the way back here, and frankly, out of sight. So I would guess at this point in view, you're probably looking at close to a 3-hour wait to get inside it. It was, again, mentioned the US and the USSR had tremendous crowds, but this was not uncommon during the busy time for the USA to have lines like this. Aboard one of the Vaporetto boats that went up and down the canals throughout the area. Another boat, this was the hovercraft. There were 2 of these ships that ran. They would take you over from one end of the fairgrounds to the other, or from Montreal. I've got some home movies of it. Unfortunately, they're only silent, but this thing was incredibly loud. It just was deafening. I wonder if the crews that worked on it were able to hear anything by the end of their summer on it. But you could definitely tell as you were coming down. This is the Cosmos Bridge that Harold mentioned. As you were walking along and you know, the hovercraft was coming, everybody would be running over the side of the bridge to watch the thing come and go. They had one accident where they tried to thread the needle between these pylons, and the guy misjudged and rammed into it and had some minor injuries. Luckily, the boat did not sink, because the river moves at a pretty good clip here, and I would not want to be dropped into the river and have to make my way to shore, given the current that goes through here. This is an unnamed piece of work. Again, if I was putting this all together, I would you know, come up with some name for it, but some of these pieces luckily have survived and have gone to other collections. And that looks like the last of the Expo 67 ones that I've done. For Harold or John, any thoughts or any favorites of looking at them?
Brought back lots of fond memories.
Yeah, it was great times there. And, you know, and I was so thrilled, like I said, when I went back up there in '69 to go to college and find out that it was still there. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, you know, it'd be like the amazing thing if you went back and found that, you know, the '64 fair was still there and you just hadn't known about it. Because I left and I had no idea they were going to keep it. And so, like I said, when I was driving into Montreal, I had no idea whatsoever. We're driving and I look over there and there's the UN, the Great Britain Pavilion sticking up. And that was the first thing I remember seeing, like, again, brain trying to process what the hell is that, and they had a different flag up at the top, but I still remembered what it was.
City of Montreal flag.
Yeah. So I said, I need to go over there. And the other guys, well, we're going to go downtown. We're going to do this. I said, fine, I'm driving. I don't care. I'll drop you off. So, well, we still have a few minutes if folks want to hang around. You want to see some pictures of Disney World?
Sure.
Okay. Again, these are all ones that I happen to have done this particular year. So the Admiral Joe Fowler riverboat. Again, I knew the real Admiral Fowler. And he was a very interesting guy. I don't know, if Glenn, if you ever worked with him or not, but
I've never met him, but I think my dad knew him. Did he retire down in Orange County somewhere?
I think he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they used to play golf.
Yeah. Just an amazing background. And, the think of what it took for the guys to build this whole property and get this whole thing done and open it on time. You needed a guy with a iron discipline and, getting these guys that came out of the military, sure, and they knew how to get the job done. Fowler and Potter were two amazing guys.
Wasn't that the one that they accidentally dropped from a crane and it got
Yeah,
destroyed like a few years after, or not
very,
long?
it didn't have a very long life. They were bringing it into the dock to do some work on it, and they slipped it off a crane and broke its back. So, yeah, Admiral Fowler had the house next to the one I used at Bay Lake, and I may have mentioned this before. We were having Bay Lake was it's a country club, golf course designed by Arnold Palmer, and Disney owned about 4 houses in a row or so out there, and they would say, I was going to Disney World so often, would I like to stay out there and stay at Dick Nunes's house instead of staying in a hotel? And I said, sure. So I had this great house, maid service, everything, and next door was Admiral Fowler. Well, one day I decided to give a big party because I had this expense account. Why not? So I invited everybody from the office. We took the pontoon boat out. We went up and down the Butler chain of lakes. We had a great time. Came back. I was putting gas in the boat. And the guy at the marina said, boy, I'm really surprised Admiral Fowler let you use his boat. He doesn't usually let people do that. Well, there were 2 pontoon boats side by side, and the same key started both, and I took the wrong one. So I had to decide at this point in time, God, do I go and say something to him or do I not say something to him? I figured it's probably best to own up to it before somebody else tells them. So I went over and said something about, hey, I want to let you know I made a mistake and used your boat, and make sure there's no dent and there's nothing wrong with it. And he looked at me and says, we're not going to do this again, are we? And I said, no, we are not. So he was pretty cool about it, but I was scared to death.
Yeah, I've stayed in Card Walker's place a couple of times.
They were nice to stay at, weren't they?
Yeah, they were nice. They were a little out of the way. That was the only thing. But they had a closet there that was like a mini bar, and a note says "Help yourself." So that was good.
That's what I figured out. I mean, it was Glenn mentions a closet. It was a really big size closet, and I opened up this thing, and it's just stacked of, cases of beer and alcohol and everything else, and it was, they partied pretty well when they were out there.
Yeah, there was a sack of marshmallows and a note saying, "Please do not take these. They're for the alligator."
Exactly. We used to go out into the dock and throw the marshmallows out there. And then one night we ran out of marshmallows, and somebody said, hey, let's see what else to eat. So we were throwing ice cubes out there. And you really get the power of the gator's jaw, because we would get a whole block of ice. I had kind of congealed inside the ice bucket and throw this, fist size chunk of ice out there. The gator would hit it, and you hear it snapping and cracking, and oh my God, I'm not going on that lake, that's for sure.
Yeah, we were sitting out, I think it was a screen porch or something, and all of a sudden an alligator came walking up on the bank. And so we didn't go out there.
No, hang on. I think I got a picture of the house here. 1 second. I have to just find it. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, so okay, so this was just some pictures I took when I was down there. This is the house at Bay Lake, and you mentioned a porch. They had a big backside area that you could, look out. The little walkway came down here to the dock where the boat was. This again, just sunset out at Bay Lake, where you go out and feed the gators.
And we did the same thing you did with a little boat going down the Butler chain. I was afraid we were going to get lost because
Luckily, I had somebody with me that knew them. Yeah.
there's these little waterways between them. And Carl Bongiorno, I'm sure
Yeah.
you knew Carl.
Yeah, Carl, great guy.
He and a guy named Gary Younger was my boss at the time, and we had a great night. That was really a fun one.
Yeah, this was great fun. Yeah, so this was Dick Nunes's house, and just to the left would have been Admiral Fowler's. So great fun. Yeah, let me get back to the others here. So let's see, we were at Admiral Fowler. Okay, so let's see, we've done that. Okay, so just again, random shots, Christmas time when they used real Christmas trees. This one is out at Lake Buena Vista, so you had the tree at the Magic Kingdom. Now, of course, you got trees at Epcot, Magic Kingdom, each of the parks, but now they're all artificial trees. Oh, somehow we ended up with a Knott's Berry Farm picture in here. So they did not build this in Disney World. The Admiral Fowler going its way. Lake Buena Vista Village. I really liked going out to the village after a day at work. You had Captain Jack's Oyster Bar was a great spot to go on and unwind, but totally, absolutely 100% different from the village that's out there today with the, it's just sort of a manic environment. This was really nice. You can see the little paddle boats out in the lake. People are out there. And it was really a pretty area.
Yeah, it's kind of low key.
Yeah. This early morning, you can see not everybody's flocking around and trying to get their picture taken in front of Mickey just yet. Early days on of Space Mountain just being constructed off to the left there. I just finished restoring a whole bunch of movies for a guy, and I'm trying to get his permission to share them on one of these talks where he goes back and shows Space Mountain under construction, a big sign with Mickey and everybody in the sled coming soon for your future enjoyment, and then Space Mountain being open. But this is you can see the circular outline taking shape, and they're having to relocate the trains around it. That's what they're busy doing here. And the Skyway gone now. Frontierland train station, the original one. One of the Bob Gurr's few failures, Bob being the guy that of course came up with the monorail and so many of the other mechanized vehicles, but this was an electric boat called a Bob Around, and like to joke with Bob, was it bobbing around in the lake or was it named after him? And he'll just smile. So, but it was a little electric boat you could take out, and the problem was the electric motors didn't last very long on a charge. So if you got too far out in the lake, you had to wave, and one of the friendship boats would come and tow you back to the dock. So they looked great. They lasted about 3, maybe 5 years, but they moved very slowly, and they were not a big hit. But it's a great way to date a picture. Inside the village, looking out of one of the glass shops that was there. Again, back before everything had to be Mickey this or Frozen that. You could go to the village. They had Sir Edward's haberdasher. You could buy an entire suit there. I bought a whole bunch of Disney ties and stuff. I still have some of them, and they have a little tag in them, Sir Edward's Lake Buena Vista. But there was all sorts of different shops, ceramic shops, glass shops, and bookstore, that sort of thing.
Sort of like the original New Orleans Square, where you had all the, the perfume shop and the actual antique store and several others that were themed to it. And now it's just Mickey stuff.
Yeah, no, I definitely preferred the theme days.
Yeah.
Outside of Germany, I got a kick of the little kid. He's just really having fun watching these guys. Off to Discovery Island when they had the bird sanctuary out there. It was right across from the Contemporary, and I could just take a boat out from, I had an office at the Contemporary. I could just take a boat out, go over, walk around Discovery Island, have a great time, and go back to work. You know, it's the sort of job you can't imagine that you really ever had, that's how you spent your lunch hours, but very lucky at that point. The main dock island still sits there and unused. If you want to get banned from Disney for life, just go out and set foot on the island and see how fast they can catch you. Space Mountain going up in the background there, the first pillars going up and the crane. The Skyway sadly gone, but the Autopia. Nighttime view, again, nighttime shots are really hard, you know, to balance for the difference between the bright and the dark parts of them, but just I enjoyed the silhouette of the Mickey balloons. Parade going down the street, of course, nowhere near as elaborate as the parades we have today, with everything having to be computerized and synchronized or whatever. But here we, you know, just take a train down the street with WDW on the side. 10th anniversary celebration was a real big one. They did this parade up and down the street twice a day the whole year. Bongo and Lulabelle. Some of the characters are very rarely ever seen at the parks these days. Today, if you put these out there, even back in the 70s, I would imagine most people had no idea that you know, Bongo and Lulabelle were. I think it was Fun and Fancy Free from the 40s. But they occasionally do have days where they bring out some of the older characters and make a big thing about Nostalgia Day. Come and get your picture taken with some of the old characters. Marina at the hotel. Again, my office was right up back in here, so I could just come down, say, hey, I'm going to take a boat, take one, you know, I would take one of the pontoon boats to go over, tie it up at the dock, walk over, enjoy, you know, time at the thing and go walk back, take it back again. Back before everything was pre-programmed, when the characters could wander free without being set upon by thousands of guests. Teacups before you put a roof on them. So again, you can date this to the very beginning of the park. The people that were in operations down there would always tell you how you idiots in California didn't realize we had rain here in Florida. So they made you know, some changes over the years. And just more parade action, little Herbie the Love Bug fun. The Barrel Bridge out at Tom Sawyer Island. I've always tried to figure out who this guy is. So if Glenn or Brock, if you have any idea, I did not find him in any directory, but who Andy Pakes was and how he got his name out here in this crate. I mean, Ed Smith is sort of a generic name, but Andy Pakes has got to be pretty specific. So I've tried to look it up, Andy Pakes, Bell Valley, Ohio, and I've not had any luck. So we can turn Don Lancaster, our internet detective, on it. But I try to figure out who this guy is and how he got his name on the crate.
I don't know, but you could send a note to Tom Morris. He'd probably know it.
Yeah, I'll ask Tom. That's a good one. He's pretty good at that stuff. Thanks for the suggestion.
Although this may be before Tom Morris's time. Unless it was that, because this is a pretty early picture of the park. You can tell by the vegetation not overflowing the edges of the island out there. You know, you can still see the banks.
Yeah, this was about 73, if I remember right. So that would have been before his down there. So you know, he might have, you know, who knows? Again, if Andy worked at WED or he was in Mapo or you know, Tom.
Yeah, the name does not sound anything like that. It's almost like somebody knew somebody who, I don't know. It's really weird.
Did you notice the one on the right says to Ed Smith?
Yeah, but that's pretty generic. So trying to track down an Ed Smith is kind of tough, although it does list a town. So we can see Ed Smith. Well, all the names on the picture are off to the side. I can't quite read. Lambert or
It's like Lambertville. Something.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I figured maybe this is somebody's father-in-law or something, and they, you know, just wanted to give him something. Hey, you know, You said I'd never amount to anything. Here, let me prove to you I can do anything I want. I'll stick your name in it.
Hey, I just did this is Werner Weiss. I did a real quick Google search, Andy Pakes. The very first thing that came up is on ancestry.com. It shows that he was born in 1886 in Czechoslovakia, home in 1940. This is the 1940 census, was in Bell Valley, Noble, Ohio. And he was the head of a household, at age 54, and it goes down to, gives the name of his wife and his 4 sons and his daughter. And so it does show up. If you, I put Andy Pakes in quote marks, I put Bell Valley in quote marks, and I put Ohio after it. And then various, and this is just the first one that came up, so I won't bore you with any more of it. But and there's no Disney connection in the 1940 census, of course.
Yeah, I'm still doing a look. I've got a few Andy Pakes. Haven't tied it yet. He's
But
out there.
at least this one's actually in Bell Valley, Ohio. So
Yeah.
I think it's the same guy.
I found him, but I couldn't figure out how he got his name there, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the last Disney World one. Let's jump to Seattle real quick. I don't think I did Seattle last week. If I did, sorry. So the United States Science Center still out there today. It's a great pavilion. If you're from the New York area, these archways here will look very reminiscent of the World Trade Center, which got destroyed on 9/11, because it was the same architect that came up with the design for both of them. But this was always intended to be a permanent pavilion for Seattle. Construction shot going up. I think this was the Hall of Commerce. Basically, it was interesting that they back at that time would open up the grounds on different dates and let the public just wander in through the construction site. So Monday through Friday, they were building a World's Fair, and Saturday and Sunday, you could come out and wander around and just take pictures of what was going on. Today, of course, you know, with ocean and everything else, I'm sure that would not be the case. But when you looked into it, they did that for a number of World's Fairs. 1933, Chicago had huge fundraisers of inviting people to come out a year before the fair opened. They did the same thing with the 39 New York and San Francisco fairs, did it in Seattle. So, you know, when you first see it, you think it's unique, and then you realize that was a big way for these corporations, not only to raise money, but if people went out there and they saw it, and then they wrote all their friends and told them about this really great thing I had seen or done, it started building word of mouth. More of the construction. This is the roof is on here, the Safeco Information Center. This is becoming the First National Bank over here. And this was Nally's pavilion built without any straight lines, including the doorways were curved. So it was interesting because they could show you just how they could curve plywood into any basically shape they wanted, cover it with concrete, and make a pavilion out of it. So if we have any car nuts on the call, I hope you enjoy this lineup of cars. And they must add a rule that you must back in. So
those cars look so out of place compared to the modern architecture.
Yeah, it really are. And when you look at them, you know, they're big honking cars. I mean, really. I go, unfortunately, to way too many accidents these days, and people are always talking about, oh, cars back then were built like a tank, they could take anything. The car back then would take anything and transmit it right through the steering column into your chest. You know, today with airbags and everything else, I've driven up to some and go, oh, no way anybody's lived through this one. And they get out and go, that was a hell of a ride, you know. So these cars are great to look at, but you know, the cars we have today are one hell of a lot safer to be in. The monorail coming around. This was a two-way Ferris wheel here. So you would be in the Ferris wheel, go around, but this would go around. The whole Ferris wheel would go around. So if you were on the top Ferris wheel, you'd be coming over down the left and down the bottom, then it'd be going up and down again. So it was they kept trying to outdo themselves with Ferris wheel technology. They had national days here. Here's Danish Day, and they're all marching in, getting ready to do a performance. Again, having a national day is a great thing because everybody that's Danish is going to make sure you go to the World's Fair and at least that day to see your son, daughter, cousin, parents, whatever perform. Another one of the permanent buildings built for this fair, this Playhouse is out there. It's a concert center, it's still on site today. Bunch of sailors obviously figured out the technology, the technique of winning the games at the Gateway Amusement Area. The only trouble is if you win these things, now you've got to carry them around for the rest of the day. Or as one sailor mentioned on the line, you found some pretty girl, asked if she would like a stuffed animal, and maybe she'd carry it around the rest of the day, and you could now have her company. So I imagine with the number of dolls these guys had won, they probably would have some luck finding somebody would like a free one. If you won one of these things, you could carry that around for the entire day. So no, thank you. The International Fountain, big signs all around it. They're not on this particular one. They probably had to put them in later, but stay out, keep out, because people would come down, wander out here to try to get wet. The fountain was computerized in terms with music, would pump up the volume. So people would be out here and all of a sudden the water would hit them. They'd go running back. This was very sharp, jagged rock. People would fall down and get hurt, or they get hurt on the nozzles out of the fountain. It's been redone today. Today it's intended to go out and play on the fountain, come out and enjoy yourself. So it's still a fountain out there, but it's a more modernized one than this today. Sermons from Science, again, been at quite a few different World's Fairs. Pretty much the same show. Going to shock myself with 1,000,000 volts of electricity and show you how I can still be alive. And just they had some different lights. These fixtures up here, not light fixtures to really provide light down to the ground. It was just the kind of googie architecture of the late 50s, early 60s to look space age and sort of futuristic, like a rocket design. This company here wanted to display Balin Manufacturing. Well, their big business was building corn cribs. So they wanted to show that no matter how much corn you had, we could build you a corn crib that is going to be able to take the weight of it. And the way they did it was they went off and got $1 million silver dollars out of the US Mint that they brought out here. And then back at this point in time, it's 1962, a silver dollar is worth $1. In 1964, when they decided to stop making silver coins, all of a sudden they started becoming more. But at this point in time, the government had piles and piles and piles of silver dollars that nobody was using for anything. So this company came by and said, could we get $1 million silver dollars from you? And they worked out a deal where they brought them out here. They sold a number of them out at the pavilion. And then whatever they didn't have, they just had to bring back to the government and pay the money for the difference. Randy?
Yeah, Bill, I collect coins. The Mint had two major silver dollar releases in the early 60s. I think one was in 61 and one was in 63. And they probably got these silver dollars from that release. That were bags and bags that were released, hundreds, thousands of bags. And what happened in the numismatic world, I think it was the 1903 New Orleans silver dollar with the old mint mark was the rarest of the Morgan dollar series. Back then was selling for several $1,000s. They did the release. The next day they were selling for $5 because bags and bags got released to the public. But I'm pretty certain this is where they probably got these silver dollars, was one of those releases.
Yeah, they got them and they did a big publicity thing, taking them across the country in armored trucks and making a whole big thing about it. And my understanding was they gave them back at the end of 62 and they were again released in 63, that they didn't have the bucks to buy it. So my understanding is they rented them from the Mint and gave them back,
which would make sense because the releases were in 61 and 63. So yeah.
Right. Now it's interesting you mentioned about what happened with the coin. One of my favorite Uncle Scrooge comic books is a thing where Donald gets they find a coin and Donald takes it someplace and is Uncle Scrooge had the money bin. He would dive in like a porpoise or anything, and he owes Donald a quarter or something and gives Donald a quarter, and Donald goes to a coin shop and it's worth $200,000 or something, and Donald then says, oh, Uncle Scrooge has more of those. Well, the next thing now they're worth 25 cents because the only reason they were rare was that Uncle Scrooge had every one in his money bin except the one that was in some guy's museum. So he did a couple stories about how things are only rare if you want them to be rare, and they're not any value once they become common. So it's a great story. I wonder if he got his inspiration by that release.
Yeah, that was a big upset, let me tell you. People had, a month before had bought them at, like I say, several $1,000s, and they had something that was worth maybe $5.
Well, the government did the same thing to stamp collectors. When they did the Dag Hammarskjöld United Nations stamp and they made a mistake, they printed it, part of it upside down. People got it and, it was worth tons and tons and tons of money. And then the mint said, or the Bureau of Printing and Engraving said, oh, we don't want to do that. So they print out thousands of the misprints. So now you can imagine if you had this thing was worth whatever, $100,000 and now it's worth 4 cents because now they made so many of them. So, I remember my dad I collect stamps, and my dad had run out and bought me a sheet of the Dag Hammarskjöld, in print errors. And, it was just so cool to have a weird United States upside down stamp. But they had purposely destroyed the market on that. I think part of that was to encourage people at the Bureau of Printing and Engraving not to do it again on purpose, because if you do, we'll just do it again on purpose, and we'll make sure you don't, you don't accidentally make a rare stamp. And we're up at the top of the Space Needle, the revolving restaurant up there. It's been redone a number of times, but still has great views of the area. Roy Rogers doing his show down below, and the TV crew here coming in. There's a group I belong to about old TV cameras. I'll have to post this one and see if they can tell me exactly which one this is. Albert Fisher took this one, and he was the guy that was in charge of TV and publicity for the fair, and he had the job of escorting Roy Rogers and Dale Evans around, and said he was one of the nicest celebrities he ever had to work with. That he absolutely down to earth, just spent time with everybody, treated everybody as an equal, and if you've worked in the industry, you know how rare that is. So just a really great shot to see him here with all the kids for his show. So I think we'll stop with that. So we covered, oh, Carolyn had an archive question. Okay, can I ask my archive question when you're done? Yes, you may.
Yeah, so Bill and I were talking, I think a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned something about CalArts and Disney archiving things, and that got me thinking about something. I'm going to actually put this question in the chat because it's got my email in it. But most of you, I think I've told most of you that Mark and I create materials for science centers and planetariums, and we're thinking about ahead to our retirement and what we do with our legacy artwork and our programs and our video. And I'm just going to ask the Brain Trust, if you have any suggestions or ideas, you can write to me. I don't need to take up time discussing it, but we have a lot of stuff where we don't really not sure what to do with, and we just hate to dump it. So if any of you have any ideas, my email is in there. I would love to hear it, because we have art boards, we have old music, we have old soundtracks, full shows, and we could probably sell some of it, like some of the IP that's sellable, but a lot of it is really not something somebody's going to buy, but you hate to lose the historical value of it. So I'm just kind of looking for suggestions is all. And I think what spurred me to think about that was your discussion about Disney and the CalArts program and some of the archive material that's floating around at different universities.
Yeah, it's in the chat. I don't see it here, but if you put your address in, people can do it. Yeah, I think it's a valid question. I've had a number of people ask me what I'm going to do with all my stuff, and I figured, I'm just going to give it to Carol and she'll deal with it.
Well, we're trying to clean out our garage here, okay?
Yeah, no, I have to get rid of this stuff. I love Carol too much to do that to her. I really, but again, where did you put the stuff? I figure I'm just going to give it all to Joey. He'll just put it together with his other stuff. But I've started talking before COVID.
I would love it. I would love it, Bill.
Before COVID hit, I was talking with a university up in Fresno. They have a World's Fair collection in the state university up there, and I was having a talk with them about that. but I've got to get back to them. I'd actually tried to talk to the, I started negotiations with the, what you call it, Library of Congress, and they said, oh, no, you can't do it because we don't know who the photographer of every single picture was. And since they have to enforce the US Copyright Act, they, if the trouble is if you take a picture that you buy on eBay, that the rights theoretically stay with somebody that you can never track down, it becomes kind of a lost art, piece. And there's a fellow I knew that wanted to do a book about historical Brooklyn. And he ran into problem after problem. So he wanted to use old maps and pictures and everything. And every publisher said, you've got to get the rights to this picture. And he said the picture was taken in 1862 or something. How do I track down the photographer from 1862? And they said, we just won't take the risk because his great grandson may pop up. So
Yeah, at least we don't have that problem with our stuff, but yeah, I mean, I've always had to track down all of that for all the materials that we use that we didn't specifically create ourselves.
right. Oh, Brent Warner's mentioned about they go to the land of bottle caps. That was another wonderful story where they have Uncle Scrooge bottle of soda flip off the bottle. Well, Brent, you tell them about the story if you remember it. It was a great story.
It was Scrooge was too nervous and he had to take nerve medicine, which came in bottles. And to help him calm down, he went to a country in the Himalayas named Tralala, where there was no money. But the caps from his bottles of medicine are intriguing and are now rare and therefore become equivalent of money in the land of Tralala. So they end the story by bringing in bombing planes, which bombed Tralala with thousands of bottle caps, and now they're common. I remember that even though I read it decades ago, because it was such a clever storyline.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
What's the spoiler, Glenn?
You just spoiled the ending of the show.
Oh no, you got to see that. I tell you, the artwork is astonishing because the valley and this little valley and it's just heaped with giant piles of bottle caps. It's really well done. I mean, any of you other guys read Karl Barks? I mean, he had some really great stories. I mean, he's known as the Duck Man, and I read stuff as a kid, and my comic collecting started because of Karl Barks. In about 1974, I was on about 74. I was in Buffalo, New York on a business trip. And I went into a 7-Eleven to buy, a bag of pretzels and a soda to sit in the hotel room. And they had the little spinning racks of comic books next to the counter. And they had these Walt Disney cartoon digests. And I thought, I think I remember this one. And I bought it and I went back to the hotel room and it was really funny. Well, the next day I went back to the 7-Eleven, bought every one of them. And I started going to every 7-Eleven in Buffalo to buy all these comic books. And Karl Barks was just really great. And he did all sorts of really great stories. And another one that he did that was really great was about raising a sunken ship. Do you remember that one, Warner? Or Brent, rather? He had
No, I do not. I haven't seen very many of the old Disney stories, and it's piqued my curiosity. I should go and find some of these. My friends who are into such things insist that the old stories are the good ones.
Oh, he had some really great ones. The ship story, Donald gets a thing. Somebody had sunk a ship and Donald wants to raise it up. And his idea is he goes down, he fills up the ship with ping pong balls. Just takes a hose down and pumps ping pong balls into the ship, and it raises the ship, right? So you think, oh, that's kind of a funny story. Well, flash forward 20-30 years later, a ship sunk, and I think it was somewhere in Saudi Arabia in the harbor, and it was a real problem because it was full of all sorts of animals, and these animals are now decomposing in the harbor, and they're trying to get the ship out of there. And this company came up with the idea, why don't we fill it up with styrofoam pellets and then raise the ship up that way, rather than the traditional way of sealing up the holes and putting pontoons and everything. So they came and raised this thing up, and then they tried to think that they could patent this, method of raising ships, right? Well, they actually put a thing to patent it, and then it got denied because it had been previously published in a Karl Barks Uncle Scrooge comic book. Yeah, amazing lawsuit, I mean, you just don't think of it. You think, oh, I've invented the best thing in the world, but Donald Duck's done it 30 years before you. So, yeah, Derek, you're saying all the pictures before 24 are public domain. I don't know what year things changed or whatever, but I just remember the guy going through the thing with Brooklyn, and he was really trying to have pictures of problems with that and also with maps. So I don't know if maps before 1924 are now public domain or not, but he could not get the publishers to touch it. And being from Brooklyn, he had a great collection of stuff, and I went to his house. Maps too. Okay, well, if I can find his number, I'll get in touch with him. He lives in Baldwin, where my parents were, and he had an incredible collection of stuff. I went down to buy some stuff from him one time, and just spent about 2-3 hours just flipping through pictures. But yeah, again, with our collections of all of our stuff that we go, if anybody has had thoughts or working with museums or universities, what's one of the things that's interesting is Beth Bramlett, I mentioned, couldn't be here today. This museum is deaccessioning, which is their fancy term for getting rid of stuff, and that's one of the things I've had concerns about. Was the Queen's Museum in New York had a big World's Fair collection. People donated all sorts of stuff to the museum, and then the museum changed management, and the new management came in and said, oh, we don't want all that World's Fair stuff, let's just get rid of it. So I think when you give stuff to somebody, you have to make sure that you've got some sort of protection that, if they're going to give it to the museum, that the museum just doesn't sell it off 10 years later. To me, if I'm going to give the museum my stuff to the university in Fresno, I'm going to take the tax deduction on it. But if I want to sell, if anybody's going to sell it, I might as well sell it and give my money to the kids, as opposed to give it to the museum and have them sell it. So that's just I know a big thing, with Richard, we went through this with Onteora. The council a number of years ago thought they could sell off Onteora and keep the money, and we had to prove that the deed said that if you do that, the money goes back to the heirs of the guy that donated the money. So you have to.
Bill, have you talked to the Smithsonian?
No, I haven't tried the Smithsonian. I can try them. And
you knew Ed Orth, right? Or yeah, his collection went there.
Yeah. Ed was a great guy. Did you know him personally? I only knew him.
I never met him. It was just through correspondence.
Correspondence and phone calls, and yeah, he had been part of the World's Fair Collectors Society, and then he split off from them and formed the Echo Group. And
right.
Yeah, I'll have to I had been in touch with somebody from the Smithsonian, and then COVID hit and everything just stopped. So I got to look it up again.
Can you do it as a loan, where you get first offer to get it back if they decide they don't want it anymore?
You can do that. And a friend of mine, a guy I mentioned earlier, Albert Fisher, he's done something with his collection where he's donated it. And I don't remember went to the Smithsonian. I don't remember which museum he went to where they hold it, but he has the ownership rights for reproduction, because he has the everything from Ted Mack's original Amateur Hour. And people will say, hey, I want to go and find when Diana Ross was auditioning for Amateur Hour. Well, you can do it, but if you want to license the footage of Diana Ross, you can go and see it for free at the Smithsonian or wherever you put it. But if you want to license it for your TV show, you got to pay Albert for the money for it. So he had given me some contacts. I have to get back in touch with him about that. It's sort of like, you're thinking about getting rid of your children. You collect this stuff all these years, but
that is exactly what it's like. Yeah.
Yeah. But I used to have, for example, Karl Barks. I had 4 pages of his original artwork and stuff, and I got rid of that a number of years ago. And you realize at a certain point in time, you just can't keep everything, Yeah.
There's a center here in Austin, the Harry Ransom Center, that has a lot of World's Fair stuff. It has Disneyland Hotel stuff, actually, and much to my surprise. And they keep just large amounts of stuff, and they accept things on permanent loan as well. Their collection is their collection's really great, actually.
Donald Ballard?
Yeah, he was actually looking at doing some research there. Some of the stuff that he'd look into was moved to the ransom center.
Yeah, I was going to suggest if you drop him a note and let him know about it. If he did know about it, I'm sure he'd be thrilled.
Yeah, he was the, I think it was even on your presentation. That's how I found out they had the Disneyland Hotel stuff here. But yeah, they have all sorts of things from theme parks, World's Fair, Hollywood Pictures. They have Scarlett O'Hara's dress from Gone with the Wind.
Do me a favor, just drop me an email with the info and I'll get in touch with them too.
Sure. Yeah, they're good folks.
Great.
I'll do that.
Well, we've sure bounced around all over the place with monkeys, and again, it's so interesting. I had gone, as I mentioned a week or two ago, to the drive-in movie next to the monkey place at that point in time, but I didn't know about the escaped monkeys until Richard mentioned it. And knowing Long Island, the thought of 150 monkeys just running amok on Long Island of 1932 is just, or whatever year, 35. It's just an amazing thing. I mean, you can imagine some of the towns you mentioned when they got them, they're quite a distance. If you can go in your backyard and all of a sudden there's a monkey in your backyard, I mean, I can see how it made the front page of the New York Times.
Well, the thing I was thinking too was in 1935 when it happened, I don't know how densely populated Long Island was at that point, because it was before Levittown and the baby boom and all the other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I double checked. Where he was about 40 miles from Google Maps to Columbus Circle, where you measure a lot of stuff. That's pretty far, and I had a friend whose grandparents, who were 8th Avenue butchers, went out to Holtzville. Things change a lot. The environment changes a lot.
Yeah, my brother lives in Holtzville. When he moved, announced he was moving out there, it was like, do you need a visa to go there? I mean, it was so far away.
Imagine buying a place in Holtzville, which is way out Long Island, in 1937, which is what they did. That was like the end of the earth, just about the end of the earth.
Now, you mentioned the Sunrise Highway. Have you ever driven out to Montauk Point?
With my family, I think we probably went out to Montauk once and Orient Point, but only then.
Yeah, because when you don't get very far into Suffolk County, Sunrise Highway goes away, and you have to just take all these little 2-lane roads that go through all the little beach towns that are all speed traps and everything. But I mean, I had grown up on Long Island, never gone out there, and then Carol and I were back with the kids, and we drove out to Montauk. So we've been out there twice now. But again, Sunrise Highway, if people are from the area, it was built because they had reservoirs on Long Island because there was nothing else out there, and they would ship water into New York City, and underneath Sunrise Highway was the main aqueduct that brought water in from Long Island into New York City. And then they ended up putting the highway on top of it and starting to develop it. But yeah, I only lived about 4 blocks from Sunrise Highway, so like I said, just a great time there. So appreciate you doing that for us, Richard. And
pleasure.
I think I'm going to be doing something about Disney TV Westerns. I have to finish putting that together, but for a change of pace, it was something I put together for the Disney Family Museum, and think I will probably go with that next week. So look forward to, again, if anybody has any mini presentations like Richard did that you'd like to share, the craziness in your neck of the woods, or things in your hometown, please keep us in mind. So and Harold, you someday you're going to show us Toronto's mass transit, right?
Oh, yes. Well, not too much has been happening for decades. Political problems, but it's a whole other issue.
Yeah. Well, Toronto, I enjoyed. I worked up in Toronto for Warner Brothers, and yeah, we had an office up there, and I'm trying to remember.
Was that a church in Carleton?
What's that?
Was that a church in Carleton?
I don't
Warner
remember.
Brothers?
I'm trying to remember where it was, and I just remember everything in Toronto seems to have one name. Like in Atlanta, everything is Peachtree Street, Avenue, Boulevard, whatever. What is in Toronto? Is it like Yonge, Yonge or something?
Yonge is the main street.
Yeah, it was on there, and because Carol and I were back there, and she was getting a real kick that winter was coming, and they were putting all sorts of covers and all the plants outside all the buildings that, you know,
Yes,
hedges and, you know, everything from freezing as winter is coming.
burlap over them, that's right.
Yeah, because she and plywood things and, you know, all sorts of stuff. And, you know, she being here for a LA, you know, type gal is, you know, she keeps talking about living someplace else. I said, you have no idea what winter's like.
Yeah.
Bill, I put it in the chat, but the habitat67.com is how you can book a tour of that.
Oh, great. Okay, I'll take a look at
And
that.
yeah,
Very
scroll down a
highly
little bit, find
recommended.
the English version.
Yeah, I remember when the, you know, right after Habitat was, you know, at the World's Fair ended, everybody was like, you know, what a giant boondoggle. And then all of a sudden people started realizing this place is kind of neat. You know, I do remember and mentioned on another talk, they found out they had a problem with the wind rushing through it, made it, some of the units very, very cold because now you got, you know, wind going underneath your floor. So they had to go and re-insulate some of the units to make them better protected against the Montreal weather. But it's held up very well, you know, over the years. You know, we only saw it from the outside when we were there 4 years ago, but I was very impressed how well maintained the grounds were. And you go online and look at like a Zillow sort of thing. You know, some people have gotten very clever where they had a 2-unit and a 2-unit, and they bought them and broken the wall down and now made a 4-cube unit. And you know, I mean, some of them are really spectacular what they've done with them.
Yes, well, that Moshe Safdie suite, which was the Commissioner General's, when you go into it, you have to put these felt slippers over your shoes to protect it. It's heritage designated. And they said it also helps with polishing the floors, having all the visitors come through with those felt slippers. But very highly recommended tour. It was on my bucket list for years and finally got it fulfilled.
Harold, is Softy's unit still in the original furnishings and all?
No furnishings in it at all. That it's really basically the shell of it.
So like the original prefabbed bathrooms?
The bathroom's still there. That it was a prefab unit and
Yeah.
it's still there. But anything, you know, carpeting or regular furniture, whatever, none of that in it. Just the basic floors, the shell of it, and the washroom, and I think the kitchen was a prefab unit as well.
So too, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are some people that have gone out of their way to try to put it back to, not that unit, but put their units back to 67.
Oh, yes.
Because every now and I gather the hardest thing people are having to find are the refrigerators that were built that would fit into the slot that goes in there. And so as a woman mentions on one of the pages, every now and then you know, Habitat 67 refrigerator comes up, and it's like people bidding on a Van Gogh painting or something. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we live out here, right 2 blocks away from where Carol and I live, are a set of homes called Eichler Homes, and I don't know if anybody's in architecture, but
they're big.
What's that?
They're big in the architecture community, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's got an area down in Long Beach too, if I remember right. I think he had some Eichler Homes.
Actually, we have Cliff May homes, which are very similar. Yeah.
But these homes he designed are really weird because they're all on a concrete slab, and he ran everything through the slab, including the air conditioning ducts and everything. And the problem now is, you imagine over 50 years or so, stuff starts corroding or whatever. But he also decided he didn't like standard size doors, so he got doors that were a little wider, a little taller. So now the people in these Eichler homes, if they want to go rebuild it, they have to go to a custom craftsman to build doors. And things like the same thing with the wind. And I gather Frank Lloyd Wright did the same thing, that, if you want to buy a Frank Lloyd house, you need to replace a window. You need to have somebody make a custom window. You just can't go to Windows or Us. So these Eichler homes, there's a whole track on them. They get used in ads and stuff all the time. And Carol and I were out walking the dogs one day, and a guy was out in front of his house, and we finally said, we've heard about these houses. Come on in, I'll show you around and look. And they have this giant atrium area, which a number of them have now sealed off and turned into an extra room. But they're really interesting houses, but every single thing in them, they said the kitchen counters, everything was designed around, say, a dishwasher of 1971 vintage. And now when you go to do anything, like we had the problem when we bought a refrigerator, it had to fit in a spot in our kitchen. That now realize everybody has really big refrigerators and we just needed a refrigerator. And we had a hell of a time finding a refrigerator to fit in our kitchen. So
You should try it now, Bill, with everything sitting on boats. My neighbors, what had that happen? They had remodeled their kitchen and, they bought a refrigerator to fit into, a specific space. And it died, so they went out to get a new one and they finally found one. It was gonna be like, 9 months before it arrived. So they ended up buying a little, the cheapest refrigerator you could buy, like at Best Buy or something, just to use until this thing finally made it off the boat. But it's,
yeah, no, it's an issue. Well, we had our house was pretty much destroyed by the Northridge earthquake. So we had it rebuilt and we just, we had a refrigerator at that point in time and built the cabinets. And I mean, the entire kitchen was gutted. There was nothing left of it. Now we've realized, oh my God, we didn't realize refrigerators are now that much bigger. We would have rebuilt the kitchen with a bigger, because we could have built it with a walk-in refrigerator. There was literally no kitchen. I mean, they had to jackhammer out the floor to repair the house. So, but now, like you say, with the delay on boats and stuff, we had a problem with our oven went out a little while ago. And I started looking online, to buy an oven. And yeah, well, you need an oven, this 8 months delivery or whatever size oven to fit inside our wall. And thank God a repair guy was able to come by and fix it. So
See you at dinner time.
yes, see you. Carol says always see me at dinner time. We're almost done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, appliances, just that they're different. Everything's bigger than it was 50 years ago, right? So, but yeah, evidently in Habitat, that's become a real big thing to get your unit back, to prestige conditions. So I'm looking forward to going there. Thanks for the info about the tour still going on. Well, I hope everybody has a good week and I hope no bad weather is coming towards anybody. Our forecast out here for the next week is really good. I think our high every day is supposed to be about 68 and no windstorms. So we're hoping we get more rain, but for the people that get snow and other stuff, good luck to you.
Bill, in Salt Lake City, we've talked about in the past how we're at a 12,000 year drought, with as far as the level of Salt Lake. And in this last few weeks, we've had something like 1,000% increase in moisture. The resorts have received over 10 feet of snow, 3 feet in just the last few days. It's been a complete turnaround. I don't know how that's going to rectify the level at the Great Salt Lake, but it sure is an amazing improvement all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was just in the news last night here how the local ski resorts are opening this weekend. And, they said they don't know if it's going to continue, that, months from now, they may be all barren dirt and rock again, but they're certainly taking advantage of the colder weather when they got snow. But my patrol partner's family was up in Big Bear or Mammoth, one of the two, and got snowed in, but they're still saying this is going to be a dry winter for us overall. So we sure need it. And I hope you continue to get it, Tom.
Did you get much rain on Wednesday?
What's that?
Did you get much rain on Wednesday?
Yeah, we got a fair amount. We have a thing out back, that collects water, and it was a fair amount in it.
Yeah, I was looking at last week when you had this, I was dealing with that leak in my hardwood floors. And so I've been looking for replacement, matching wood to replace it, which isn't easy, but finally found some in Fullerton and I went up there to get it. And coming back, it was raining so hard on the 57, traffic came literally to complete standstill. People you couldn't even see 3 feet in front of you.
Yeah, it came down pretty good, and I was lucky. I didn't have to go out that day, so I tried not to. But I did have to end up running down to pick up something at a store, and I just put new wipers on all the cars. So I was I can see this time, because the people that don't live here, when we get the heat, 105 degrees, it just takes your windshield wiper and solidifies it, so it doesn't have any absorbency. It doesn't have any. It just goes across the window and doesn't, flex to it all. So, it was a pleasure to put them on, but yeah, it was coming down pretty good there for a while. Matter of fact, I remember you remember you mentioned it. I was gonna go I pulled in the parking lot of a store and told Carol I'll be home in a few minutes. I wanted to get something at the store. I got into the parking lot and it's just started raining like mad. I realized I've lived without this thing for the last 3 months. I can live without it again. I just drove home. It was coming down so hard. So maybe I gotta go buy what I needed to buy today. It's sunny. But yeah, it was really coming down. I hope you got your floor fixed.
Tuesday, I got all the materials, but yeah, the guys are coming out on Tuesday. What a mess. I put bamboo in about 10 years ago. It was the big thing, renewable and all that. Nobody carries it anymore. It's impossible to find.
Yeah.
Because they discovered it doesn't wear that well.
Right.
You should have asked me, Randy. I could have told you.
What's that?
I said, you should have asked me. I could have told you.
Yeah.
Not to go with bamboo.
Yeah, I love the look of it. And I don't have kids or pets, but I noticed like I dropped a plastic bottle of shampoo on once. I was getting out of a bag and put a big dent in it. Yeah.
What you need to do is get asbestos tile.
There you go.
It's still available, I think.
When they were remodeling LAX, they had us working in that building. They were doing all this asbestos removal, Terminal 6. Most of the others had been done years ago, but Terminal 6, this was probably about 5-6 years ago. And Delta had a couple gates over there. They had all these plywood corridors built, and then all this plastic, trying to protect people from asbestos. But I was surprised they didn't just close the building down, but they just, guess they couldn't afford the gates to do that. So.
Well, as I said, when we had our house redone, they had it looked like a scene out of ET with a big, tube going into the house and guys in moon suits coming out and everything. And, I was expecting again, ET to come out the door. So they take it pretty seriously. Well, great. We'll see you all hopefully next week.
Thanks, Richard, for the monkey business.
Yeah.
Thanks. I can't make it next week. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right.
Great
show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about next week too. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
Thank you for the monkeys. They were a big hit.
Okay, bye-bye, folks.
Gonna go have a banana.